been chasing, putting my faith in. Let it fade, let it break into pieces. Just give me Jesus. Just give me Jesus. There's nothing I desire that can't be found in you. You're everything that I've ever needed. Just give me Jesus. Oh, just give me Jesus.
Well, good morning to you, and glad you're here. My name's Jake. I'm one of the pastors on staff here at Faith. And Stephen and Haley had their new baby, Micah Jane. She's just an adorable little squish, and so he gets a few weeks off, which means last week you got Weston, and this week you get me, the C team. And so I'm so glad to be with you this morning. And so here's what I'm going to do is I did this first service as well, and you'd think I'd learn, but this is impractical, and I promise you, we're going to get to this in a moment, and I'm excited about it. But we'll get there, and you can just wonder. But here's what I've got this morning is we're in the Gospel of Mark again, in case you didn't know that, and we're in Mark chapter 10. And what I love about the story that we're going into today is it's about a guy who's blind, and Jesus heals him. Spoiler alert. But it's the last miracle in the chapter of Mark, except for, of course, when Jesus rises from death. But it's the last miracle that Jesus does for somebody in the Gospel of Mark. And so we're going to read that in just a minute, starting in verse 46. But here's what I want to do first, is I want to tell you just a little story about me. And to get there, I want you to think about this question. Are you familiar with the word or phrase mob mentality? Mob mentality. And then I want you to think about it. Have you ever been caught up in that mentality, that mob mentality? It's bigger than peer pressure, right? Peer pressure is I did something dumb because a friend dared me to when I was in high school, right? That's peer pressure. Mob mentality is like a much larger system of we all did something together, right? And we've probably seen the worst of it the last couple of years. And I wouldn't accuse you of doing that, but I bet you have been caught up in some version of a mob or mob mentality before, right? And here's what I want you to think about is I'll tell you my story and how this works. But I went to Crestwood Elementary School, not far from here. We're the Cobras, and we're more proud of the fact that we decided what the state insect was. If you went to Crestwood or you had a kid that went to Crestwood, you know. And if you didn't, you don't care, right? And so the state insect, by the way, is the dragonfly. You're welcome for that little piece of advice, information. But at Crestwood, when I was in 6th grade, of course, we had PE, just like anybody else in elementary school. And the PE teacher at Crestwood had a little bit of a reputation at the time. And it's not a normal PE teacher reputation, right? There's a little bit of a joke out there around with teachers that, like, those who can't do, teach, and those who can't teach gym, right? There's like that thing. I don't know if you've ever heard that. It's not true, and it's not true about this particular teacher either. She's actually pretty athletic, or was. I don't know her now. She was pretty athletic. She was a pretty good teacher. She knew a lot about sport, but she had a little bit of a reputation for being kind of mean, a little reputation for being a little bit cruel from time to time. And when I was in 6th grade with this teacher, who will remain nameless, she was kind of particularly mean to a kid in my class that we all liked. And so we walked across the courtyard back to our classroom for lunch, and we started whispering about how mean she had been. Like, she's bullying students, and that's not okay, right? And then, of course, after lunch in elementary school comes lunch recess, which is the long recess. It's a half an hour. And so, like a virus, we spread the information across the school during this recess that she is a bully and she is, at some level, like abusing children in her classroom. And we, like I said, successfully spread that information. And as I was doing it, I was like, why am I saying this? But it felt like something that happened to me more than something I chose, right? And it had to have been less than 2 days, and like administration and my teacher and the PE teacher were in our classroom, and we were getting a talking to. We got scolded pretty good because teachers get fired for that. I don't know if you know that, but they do. So it was like, hey, you can't just like say these things because that's how teachers lose their job. And as they were sharing, it was like, well, she was wrong. I mean, that was the first thing I thought, right? And our whole class was there. But after 20 or 30 or however long of this real talking to about, like, this is, they actually did a really good job talking, like this is what you do when there's actual abuse, but you don't do it for stuff like this, right? And finally we were like, yeah, I guess you're right. We were wrong. But here's what I'm talking about. When I talk about like mob mentality, that's what I mean. Somebody got picked on, something wasn't right, and 3 or 4 people started, and then the rest of us were like, yeah, we're going to get on that too. Right? And so a lot of the time it's negative, but sometimes it can be a positive thing. But I think we see a lot of it happening all over the place. And in our story today, it's kind of couched in that. It's really about 2 guys. It's Bartimaeus, he's blind. We're going to call him Bart because that's a lot easier to say. And Jesus. And then there's this crowd that kind of turns into a little bit of a mob. And that's what the story is couched on today. And here's what I'm talking about. You've maybe done it this way. Maybe you were a perfect child, which is fine. I apparently wasn't. But maybe you do it today, where you are downtown and there's somebody begging, and it's like, if no one stops, none of us have to. Right? Just keep walking. If nobody gives them money, then none of us have to. There's the guy on the side of the road that kind of shaking the cup at the freeway exit, and it's like, if you don't look at him, he's not there. And if none of us look at him, he's not there, and he won't see us. But that's not how it actually works. But we kind of go, well, if all of us do this, then none of us have to do anything special, right? And that's how this story starts today. It's like if we all are doing something, none of us looks bad. And so let's look at this story. Mark chapter 10, verse number 46 goes like this. It says, then they, that's Jesus and his disciples, reached Jericho. And as Jesus and his disciples left town, a large crowd followed him. A blind beggar named Bartimaeus was sitting beside the road. And it continues, when Bartimaeus heard that Jesus of Nazareth was nearby, he began to shout, Jesus, son of David, have mercy on me. Okay, here we go. Be quiet. Many of the people yelled at him, but he only shouted louder, Son of David, have mercy on me. When Jesus heard him, he stopped and he said, tell him to come here. So they called to the blind man, cheer up. They said, come on, he's calling you. Bartimaeus threw aside his coat, jumped up, and came to Jesus. What do you want me to do for you? Jesus asked. And I love the Gospel of Mark because he records a lot of questions. He records the question of, who do they say I am? Who do you say I am? And here Jesus asked this question, what do you want me to do for you? And what's interesting is last week that was the same question that he asked James and John. If you were here, James and John asked for everything. They said, we want to be right-hand man in heaven. We want power and prestige. We want an extraordinary life. That's how they answered the question. Check out how Bart answers the question. My rabbi, the blind man said, I want to see. And Jesus said to him, go, for your faith has healed you. Instantly the man could see, and he followed Jesus down the road. Let me pray, and then we'll unpack this together. Let me pray. God, thanks so much for today. Thanks for your word, and thanks for this story that's so simple, just a couple of verses about a guy who gets healed. But God, there's so much to unpack, and so this morning, can we all get a little bit closer to you? Can we all learn a little bit more about what it looks like to be a follower of yours? And can your words be spoken to each of us today? It's in your son's name we pray. Amen. And so, here's what we want to do with this story. I think there's kind of 2 trains of thought. And there's kind of 2 different groups of people in this story. There's the mob. We're not actually really that worried about them. That's just what the story's couched in. And then there's these 2 other categories of people. And the first is what I want to talk about here. This idea that some of us are blind, that some of us need to be healed, right? And so when we look at this story, we meet a guy named Bart who sits at the exit of the city right at the gate every single day, begging for just enough to make it to the next day, right? And he's sitting there and he's asking, and there wasn't government handouts or there weren't systems in place that would take care of people like Bart. Instead, he would take his one possession, his cloak, and he would sit on it by day or wear it to keep warm, and then by night it was his blanket, and then he would beg for food, he would beg for money, he'd beg for whatever it took in order to make it to the next day. And if he didn't get it, well, you're out of luck, right? And that's the guy we meet today, and he's getting just enough to survive. In mob mentality, people are just ignoring him. If we all ignore him, none of us have to pay attention to him. And if he cries out for help, if we tell him to stop, we don't have to pay attention to him either. And so, verse 47, son of David, have mercy on me. Verse 48, they silence him. They say, quiet, shut it, you, right? And so that's what happens in this story. But what we see is then he catches the ear of Jesus. And he gets his greatest desire, which is healing. Right? Verse 51 talks about this idea that Jesus said, hey, go, your faith has healed you. And you know what's cool is that the word that's used for healed there is also oftentimes translated as saved. And I think Bart was saved, and I think Bart was healed in this moment, right? We see that he gets to see, but then we see he follows Jesus. He's got this, all right, Jesus is the guy I'm going to follow. And I think we see both in this story. But here's the question then is, what do we need? And so, like I said, there's two trains of thought, and there's a lot of us in the room, or some of us in the room, that fall in where Bart is at the start of the story. Man, we need something from Jesus. And here's what I know is there are people that actually need healing or need encouragement or need freedom from something. We sang last week this song that we talked about, I speak Jesus over addiction and shame and anxiety, and it's like, man, I need Jesus to heal those things in my life, right? And that's what Bart needed. But on top of that, we also know that there's people in this room who probably would say, I don't know if I would call myself a Christian. I don't know if I've been saved yet, but Jesus might be able to do something for me. And we're glad both parties are here this morning. And what we want to do is we want to talk a little bit about some of that. And so with that in mind, let's look at this healing track, this healing train, this idea of Bart first, and then we'll look at the second part of the story. But here's what we've got first is, number one, healing does not come easy, right? Jesus does all the work. Healing, salvation, it doesn't come easy. Jesus does all the work, but there's still a part for us to play. And so when we look at this story along with any other miracle that we've read from the Gospel of Mark, what we notice is there's like people who are working against the guys who are trying to get saved, the guys who are trying to get healed, the people who want something, right? There's actual spots where Jerry, right, his son died, and he shows up to Jesus going, well, I thought maybe you could heal him, but he's dead now. And what does Jesus do? Jesus brings him back to life. Okay? There's other spots where there's crowds of people in the way and they can't get to Jesus. And what do? They like climb up and over this roof and they dig through and they drop their friend right in front of Jesus. There's people that try to silence and cast out and get rid of. Plenty of people who need help get pushed out. And that's true in this story too, right? He calls out to Jesus and they try to silence him. And so there's actually some work that needs to be done. It's not always easy. And here's the encouragement this morning is we want to encourage you to persist. And what we know is there's people that have walked in this morning going, I'm going to give God another shot. I'm going to ask God today for this. And I want to say, man, way to go. I'm glad you're here this morning because that's what Bart did. No matter what the crowd thought, he went for it. So we go, who really cares what your family thinks about your faith? Who really cares what your friends think about your faith? Who really cares what they say in pop culture or any of those other places about your faith? Because Jesus is interested in healing and saving you, right? And he'll worry about everybody else on his own time. We don't need to worry about them. And we look at this and we go, your faith is yours, and don't let anybody stop you from fighting for that, right? And sometimes it is tough. And sometimes it is a final drag. And we go, hey, if you showed up today there, giving God one more chance today, I want to invite you after service. We have people that you can pray with. We have pastors that you could pray with. And we'd love for you to do that. And if you're online, you can actually message in and we'll give you a contact person so that you can be prayed with, because that's an important thing too. And so what we want you to know is healing doesn't always come easy. It is a thing where we have to persist. The second thing we see in Bart's story is this: healing requires intentionality. Right? So the same question Jesus asked 2 weeks in a row. James and John said, hey, Jesus, we want something from you. And he says, what do you want from me? And they replied, we want to be at your right hand. We want this power, this prestige. We want extraordinary. And Jesus goes, you don't have any idea what you're asking. Right? If you look back at that passage, he goes, you don't know what you're asking for. And I think a lot of us live our lives in that way where we go, I'm going to say yes to everything because I'm not really sure what I want. And so I'm going to try this and do that and go there. And we fill our lives and then we burn out and we crash and burn out, right? But the other side of it is some of us don't know what we want. And so what do? We do the opposite. We just do this. We do nothing. We don't pick anything. And we just travel down this like maybe life will fall into my lap. And what we know in this story is actually there's a need to know what we need. And so we assess where we're at and we go, man, I've got to be persistent, but I also got to be intentional. And so when Jesus asks Bart the question, what happens? He goes, I just want to be ordinary. I don't want to sit on the side of the road and beg for what I need. I just want to be able to see so I can work. I just want to be ordinary, right? And Jesus, as we see, does something amazing. He's a great physician and heals them, and he is ordinary. And what I love about that is I think a lot of the time we think Jesus wants somebody extraordinary. We think Jesus wants us to have a power, position, something. And the reality is he's just looking for some ordinary people to do a little bit of work. But we're going to talk more about that in a minute. And then here's the last thing that I want to point out about Bart. Healing requires risk. Right? So if we think about this story, he had to be a little bit vulnerable to go, hey, this is what's actually going on in my life. I actually need a little bit of help. I got to ask for it. I don't know about you. I don't like to ask for help from anybody for anything because well, actually, if you want to know, if you're like into Enneagrams and stuff, I'm an Enneagram 1, which means I'm a perfectionist, which means nobody's going to get it right. I think I can. I want you to know that. I rarely do. But that's how I function. So I don't like asking for help. And so I don't know about Bart. He might not have been a 1. He might have been something else. But, man, he needed help. He had to risk it. The crowd tries to silence him. And what did he have to do? He just had to keep getting louder. Son of David, have mercy on me, right? Have mercy on me. He just kept going for it. Who cares what they think, right? And we've seen crowds run people out. We've seen crowds do all kinds of stuff. And in this case, he's like, who cares if they do that? And the other thing that I think we see about Bart that's kind of cool in this story is that he doesn't make an excuse for somebody else. I love making excuses for other people. I'm not going to ask them that because they're probably too busy. I'm not going to ask them that because they're not going to want to do that. I'm not going to ask them that because it's too last minute. I'm not going to. And Bart could have done that. He could have gone, he's headed out of town. He's on his way out. He's got other things to do. I'll catch him when he comes back by. And I've been blind for most of my life, all my life. We don't know. And you know what? I can wait a couple more days. What is it? Jesus will surely come back through. And instead he goes, no, it's actually important to me. And I know what I want, and I've been persistent, and now I'm going to risk it and go for it. And that's what he does, and he gets what he prays for. And so again, today, if you're looking for healing, if you're like, I don't know what it means to be a Christian and I'm not saved, that's what our prayer team's for, and they love to talk to you through that because it's time to take a risk and go for it. Right? And I actually think that leads us into this second group of people. Because there's Bart who needs healing, who needs salvation, and then we actually watch Jesus. And Jesus realizes it's time to act. And so we know that it's time to act. And so if you'd go, hey, Jake, I am a Christian. I've been a Christian a long time. Some of you, Jake, I've been a Christian longer than you've been alive. And that may be true, right? But here's what we've got is we go, it's time to act. And what I love is, we're going to talk about this in a second too, but what I love is the minute Bart gets saved, what did he do? He gets up and he follows Jesus. He knew it was time to act. And so we look at both Jesus and Bart, and both of them go, let's go for it. And so here's what I know about Christians, and I've been in church long enough. This is actually my 12th summer in student ministries and as a leader in student ministries. And here's what I know is there's two different kinds of people in the church that are saved. There are people who serve, and then there's people who make excuses. And that's what there is. And the first category of excuses is, I don't have enough time. I don't have enough time to do what I need to do. And what I love is we see Jesus actually practices a pause. Jesus had time, right? And if you think about this, he's on his way out of town. He's probably going somewhere. He's on a speaking circuit, speaking at all kinds of places. He's been healing people, and then, I don't know, saving people from the sins of the world. Just a little small task that he's also working on. And Jesus had this moment to pause and go, actually, in this moment, you're important, right? And so for today's purposes, the comedian Brian Regan will also be a theologian for us. But he's actually pretty funny and pretty clean. But he has a bit that I love about Pop-Tarts, and he's got a photo kind of like this. I don't know if you've had a Pop-Tart in a while. They still taste like cardboard, but for some reason, come on. And they're supposed to be toasted. They're supposed to be warmed up. They're disgusting if you don't. And so they go in a toaster. But if you see that circled part there, for those of us that have a busy schedule, there's 3 points. Number 1, place pastry on a microwave-safe plate. Done. Number 2, heat on high for 3 seconds. Good. And then cool briefly. Don't wait too long. Cool briefly before handling. And here's what we know is Brian Regan points this out. And then he goes, hey, if you have 3 seconds to cook breakfast, your schedule is way too busy. It's time to quit some things. And so I think a lot of us live like that, where it's like, man, 3 seconds for breakfast, I don't have. And that's a little bit of what we're talking about today. If you are too busy to serve somewhere, if you're too busy to give back, it's time to go, hey, actually at work, I don't have to say yes to everything. Hey, as the world reopens, my kids don't have to play 6 sports a year, right? We can say no to some things because serving and giving back is one of the best things that we can do. And so we want to encourage you to think about that. And now here's what I know is some of you would go, Jake, you don't know my story, and I have to work 2 jobs, or I have to whatever. And that's where we go, then man, it's time to pray with somebody today. Because you're actually in category 1. You need some healing. You know what I love is we teach FPU here. We do all kinds of stuff like that because we know there's people that have mountains of debt that need help. They need to work multiple jobs. It's like, well, let's get your house in order so you don't have to keep doing that, so that you can give back. Or another reason may be true and fine and well that you are pretty busy, but let's today begin to pray towards what would it look like to get your house in order so that you can serve, that you can give back, right? And here's what I know about most of this room. Like I said, most of you are probably not the I'm too busy person, because I've also been around church long enough to know that most of us go, I actually don't know what I have to offer, Jake. I don't know what I'm going to bring to the table. I don't know if the schedule is going to line up perfectly, or, and I've seen this before, I've got this sin issue that I can't figure out. And I wish I could, but if I could, maybe then I'll start serving. If I didn't feel shame about my past, I would start serving again. And I want you to know that that's not what we see in this story about Jesus or about Bart. Right? What I want you to think about again is Jesus is on his way out of town. It's not like he was he wasn't at a temple somewhere. He wasn't at a little synagogue. He wasn't at a clinic. He didn't have a whole medical team with him. But he still had a moment to pause and go, what can I do for this guy? Right? And then he healed him, which is amazing. And then we think about Bart. What does Bart do? He's sitting on the side of the road begging for his daily needs. He gets healed. He throws his cloak off. And then he gets on the road and follows Jesus. What does a guy who has nothing and who has no marketable skills have to offer Jesus? Nothing. That's the answer. There's no secret there. We don't know if he's been blind for his adult life or his whole life, but regardless, he's been blind enough that he doesn't have a marketable skill like, oh, geez, I'm a great accountant. He doesn't have that, right? He's been a beggar, and he's poor and has nothing, but he realizes, I just watched Jesus do something amazing, and I can get on the road and follow Jesus and do something for him too. And what we know is that Jesus loves to use ordinary people to do extraordinary things. I was thinking about this recently. The We Love Kent group that spread food all over the city, that served families all through the pandemic. You know, it was started by a janitor. And I remember when I was in high school, there was a pastor who talked about this idea that, like, Jesus could change the world with a janitor if he wanted to. And then we watched this last 2 years as a janitor changed our city. And I think that's amazing, right? And so we want you to know Jesus uses totally ordinary people to do extraordinary things. And so we go, it's time to act. It's time to get involved. And here's what I know is people are looking at the clock going, Jake's got about 5 minutes left, and he set this box here. And what's in the box? Did he forget about the box? And here's what I want you to know is we're doing a remodel in the high school room. And this box is full of nothing but empty boxes. It's a recycling is all it is. I brought a box up here to distract you because here's what happens with our Christian life. We go, if I get a gift set that would come to me, then I'll serve. If it lines up perfectly, then I'll serve. Maybe if I didn't sin or have shame or any of that anymore, then I'll serve. And we're waiting for this next thing. And extraordinary opportunities pass right by us, right? And so some people today, because if you're like me, you were like, well, Jake just said he's a 1, so he certainly won't forget about his object lesson. But did he? And you missed half of what I said. And I think that's how a lot of us live. A lot of us live life waiting for this box to open up, waiting for something to show, and it doesn't. And then we miss moments to do something extraordinary, right? And so here's what I want to show you is I want to share with you just a little bit about my team. I have the pleasure to lead our team that runs FSM, Faith Student Ministries. We have an amazing army of volunteers. I complained this last week because I had like 6 adults show up to our event. And then I paused for a minute and I was like, I was talking to a youth pastor yesterday who said he only has 6 volunteers. And I was like, okay, we've got 30. I'll chill out a little bit, right? But we have an amazing team that loves and serves students. But there's a little bit of an inside joke that we have with some of us. Because what will happen from time to time is a student will share an abuse that happened in their life, something happened at home, an addiction that they have. And then we pause and we're like, where's the more adult who's going to take care of this? Because I'm not ready for this. I do that. I've had people tell me stories, and I'm like, there's got to be somebody more equipped for this, right? And all of our adult leaders do that. And so here's what happens, though, is I know that none of our adult leaders would walk in and be like, hello, I'm an expert in high schoolers. I'll save you from screwing your kids up. Trust me, I've got this. 0% of our adult leaders feel that way. I want you to know that. And here's what they do feel. They go, man, I love Jesus, and I would love it if students would meet him. And they run with that. They run with that idea. And so I've got some photos I shared with our incoming 7th graders recently, and I want to share them with you. The first on the left there is a student whose parents don't go to church here. He didn't really grow up here. He got invited by a friend and then got saved. And now what? Helps lead our students in worship. That's pretty cool. You know why he does that? Because he's got friends that are here, and he's got adult leaders that love him. He's got adult leaders that go, keep coming back. Let me teach you some more. Let me teach you some more. And then we see over here, we've got these students. This was the last time we were able to do some mission trips, but in 2019, we've got students who went and served in Mexico, and students are kind of known for being slothy or lazy. And you know what's awesome is these guys go, man, my adult leaders give up week after week after week for me. I could give up a week in the summer to change somebody's life. And that's what they did, and that's amazing, right? And then we look at this story here, and I love these ones. The bottom corner is a student who's got a great leader who's really active and leads well. And here he is at summer camp just taking lead of his team. You know why? Because he's been led well by an adult that was like, I don't really know what I'm doing, but I'm going to try, right? And then we've got a butthead who gets total butthead all through high school, and I'll tell him that to his face. But all through high school, and then he gets saved and baptized and becomes a brother in Christ, right? And we look at that and we go, well, that's because that dude in the red shirt never stopped talking to him. No matter how often he wanted to give up, he just kept sharing and kept sharing and kept sharing. And we watch anxious sophomores in high school who wouldn't talk to anybody in middle school stand in front of a room of middle schoolers and proclaim how good God is. Why? Because that's what people have done for him. And that's amazing, right? That's amazing. And so I look at this story of what our adults do, and over the last 2 years, we've had a crazy journey. And a lot of youth ministries didn't do much because people paused and they went, well, we'll wait till this pandemic ends, right? People paused and said, well, I don't want to risk getting sick, or I don't want to wear a mask, so I'm not going to go. Or people would have like, I don't even know what to do with a kid whose anxiety is now through the roof because of what's going on, right? Social anxiety is crazy right now with students. But what I love about our team of adult leaders is what they do. They said, I don't know much about anxiety. I don't know much about virology. I don't know much about any of that. But what I do know is I know that I love Jesus, and I know that Jesus loves students. So let's go for it. Let's give it a shot, right? And it's amazing because, you know, what happened is these are older photos, but this is still happening. And students have given their lives to Christ over the last 2 years. And people are getting saved, and people are stepping into new opportunities going, well, my leader did it for me, and now I think I can do it for some other people. And so here's what I want to say today is it's time to act. It's time to do something, time to do anything. I want you to know that I'm an average youth pastor. I'm not great, but Jesus is an amazing youth pastor. And I go, well, I'm going to do whatever I think Jesus would do, and we'll figure this thing out, right? And that's what those leaders do. That's what people do. And so if you've been waiting for this skill set to fall in your lap, if you've been waiting for the right time, if you've been waiting for sin to go away, if you've been waiting for shame, if you've been waiting for all that to move on, you're waiting for nothing, and you're letting extraordinary pass right by. And so go, you know what? I'm an ordinary person, and I love Jesus, and I want to serve too. And so we've got opportunities. You don't have to join my team. You're more than welcome. My team's awesome. You'll end up with a flock of flamingos in your yard. It'll be great. But on top of that, we've got children's that need help, and we've got places to serve that if you're like, I don't know kids, I was with some elementary schoolers this week. You know how weird I am with elementary schoolers? There's a reason I don't do that. And maybe you're that way. You're like, I'm weird with elementary school, I'm weird with students. We got service places all over our church. And if you're like, the church isn't right, Vine Maple Place down the road would love to have you. Union Gospel Mission would love to have you. There's places all over that would love for you to come and serve. And we go, stop waiting. Stop waiting for the perfect moment, because it's never going to come, and you're going to miss great opportunity. And so here's what we want to say. Number one, those of you who need to get your house in order, those of you who need healing, those of you who need to be saved, today is the day to take a risk and go to the back during this next song or after service and pray with one of our prayer team people, one of our pastors on staff. Number two, those of you who aren't serving, give it a shot. And you know what? If it doesn't work out after a couple weeks, try something else. And that's awesome. And we're great with that. And the third thing is, those of you who are serving, we want to say thank you, and we love you, and we're grateful for you, and keep doing it. And when you have days where you feel like, I don't know if I'm doing it right, I don't know if I might have messed this up, I want you to know, that's all right, Jesus got this. And that's what I do. I wake up every day and go, Jesus loves these students more than I do, and so we're going to figure this thing out, right? And so with that, I'm going to invite our worship team back up, and then I'd love to pray for you. God, thanks so much for this morning. Thanks for the opportunity to be together. I'm so grateful that a year ago we were sitting at home, or we were sitting in the lawn sweating, watching a screen, and now we get to be together to worship together, to learn together, to grow together, and to serve together. And so, God, that's what we ask for. Is we ask for you to come close to us, to meet us where we're at. Hey, God, we also ask for you to bring healing and salvation to those in the room who need it. God, we ask for that this morning. We beg for that. And God, we ask for the courage for the people who need to risk it. We love you, Lord. It's in your Son's name we pray. Amen.